Hi, I'm Nina Samuels, and apparently you have nothing better to do with your time, so you are listening to the Holy Shoot podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the Holy Shoot podcast, a podcast that is all about the amazing world of professional wrestling. This week we have a break from the Holy Shoot Wrestling Challenge to present the latest in our series of Holy Shoot interviews, where I, your host for today, Jason, get to chat to the interesting people involved in the grassroots of wrestling. This week I am joined by James Musselwhite. You may not know his name, but I bet you've seen his work. James, also known as Y2 Jim Bob on social media, is a professional photographer who has taken some of the most amazing pictures of wrestlers that you've ever seen. You know those badass photos of Tony Storm, Jimmy Havoc, Marty Scurll, Will Ospreay and Adam Cole, baby, that you've seen online that stand out above the rest. James took those and many more. You can check him out on social media on Y2 Jim Bob, but you can also head to portraitofawrestler.com to see his portfolio and actually pick up some rather rare and cool signed items from some of those names. Before we go into his photography though, we went in depth on his work alongside the product David Starr to form We the Independent. This is something really important that all wrestling fans should care about, as We the Independent are working to improve the rights and support for professional wrestlers. It's actually amazing how little protection wrestlers are getting due to their unique status as both sports people and entertainers, but also being neither. We the Independent are helping wrestlers to get union coverage, and we all know unions have never existed in the wrestling world before, so they deserve your attention right now. I chat to James about what's next for We the Independent, how he got into his wrestling photography, and who the best guys have been to work with, as well as some insight on how important a fully developed character is, not just in the ring, but also when having your picture taken. That follows right now. So now I'm joined by James Musselwhite from both WeTheIndependent.com and portraitofawrestler.com. James, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm getting by. It is a lovely sunny day. I want to be outside cycling, but I want to do this interview even more, I think so.
Well, that's very kind of you to say so. This is the ideal day to do. You should do a cycling interview. You should mic both people up as they're cycling on a sunny day and see if you can sort of ask questions whilst also maintaining the highway code. I think that would be a good podcast.
I think working out how you counter the wind noise and resistance as well, and have to cover the gear up, that would be a great challenge to do.
Be a good challenge to do, wouldn't it?
I
remember, back in the day, I used to listen to, I'm talking about 15 years ago, I used to listen to one of the very first running podcasts, and it was just a local bloke, I think he was down in Kent, and he would just interview himself while he was running. That was the podcast. You'd hear everything, every breath, everything, and there was no noise cancellation. But because it was the only running podcast at the time, I forced myself to listen to it. There are a lot better ones now, obviously. But bless him, I enjoyed it.
Oh, cool. Okay, so James, do you want to do a quick? Who are you? It's always nice to know who I'm talking to. I will have explained a bit more, but it's good to get in your views. Why am I talking to you today?
Why are you talking to me? Good question. Well, I'm a professional, career-wise, I'm a professional photographer who specialises in images of professional wrestlers, and I've shot lots of different wrestlers in lots of different companies and in lots of different countries around the world, I suppose. And I think we try with Portrait of a Wrestler to not just turn up with a backdrop and do promo pictures, although the next shoot I'm doing this afternoon is exactly that, because someone needs some new promo pictures for promo and match cards and things like that. But what makes Portrait of a Wrestler different is that we'll try and bring in elements of classical photography and storytelling to actually create a narrative within the picture. So they're not just, pictures of wrestlers screaming at the camera. We try and when we do it to the highest level that we possibly can, we try and take their characters on a little bit further. And we've just moved into doing a lot more video in the last 12 months. which I'm really enjoying the challenge of. I'm enjoying the challenge of script editing and directing and producing video content for wrestlers, which is giving me even more creativity and another sort of string to our bow, I suppose. And in the last, I guess, 3 to 4 months, I've helped David Starr set up We the Independent, which is a movement that has just got a rocket to it at the moment. It feels like it's really struck a chord with fans and with wrestlers alike. And it's a weird thing that the more we scratch the surface, the digger we dig, the more we find and the more we uncover with it. And it's a real fascinating project for me to get involved with, because both David and I are David certainly is very politically led. I think I like to think I have sort of like an interest in it, I suppose. But I'm not a mad obsessive like David would, like you might think that David is. But I think we both have a very firm fundamental interest in the fundamentals of politics, and I think we're using that to maybe generate sort of interest and support in helping professional wrestling.
Great summary there. We'll come back to Portrait of a Wrestler, because it's your photography work is amazing. I definitely want to talk about it. But I thought if we start with We the Independent. Yeah, so I mean, I've been a fan of both your photography and then been a fan of David Starr for a while. So I've been watching this sort of evolve, and now this has become quite a big thing, really. I mean, the way I look at We the Independent, it's just trying to help wrestlers get better rights and actual, I guess, insurance and protection for all the work they're doing. I mean, is that a fair summary? I mean, what's your one-line sell on what you guys are trying to do?
It's the same line that David reiterates. I suppose we're providing freedom of protection for independent artists through membership to Equity, which is like a trade union for performance artists. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is, if we bring it back to maybe my photography, when I first went self-employed in photography, I joined an association of photographers that represent photographers around this country and internationally. And essentially what my small fee every month does with that photography association is it provides me with legal advice, it provides me with support, provides me with mentoring, provides me with help, and just basically a community of other photographers to go in to seek advice on specific issues. I've only had to call upon the legal support twice, but it's certainly been cheaper for me to pay my monthly subscription and call upon that legal support than it would be for me to find a private lawyer to settle sort of contract disputes and things like that. And ultimately, it forces me to be a more professional photographer, forces me to conduct myself in a more professional way. And we think that wrestling it falls into this. It's historically fallen into this weird grey area. The wrestlers have always been able to get trade union support, but not the same level of support as actors, because they don't fall into the category of actors, nor do they fall into the category of sports people in terms of like joining and memberships and insurance and things. So the sports insurance, if you take something as simple as injury insurance. When Equity are working with their sports insurers, the sports insurers wouldn't cover wrestlers because they said it's not sport, they're acting. And when they went to their acting insurance, they said, no, we're not going to cover them because they're not acting, it's a sport. So they had this weird grey area where wrestlers, they could join up to Equity, but they wouldn't receive that benefit. Now, in the first month of We the Independent being set up, we had such momentum behind it that Equity could go to their insurers, go to their insurance underwriters and get them to change that policy. And that article, I think, was ran in either The Guardian or The Times last week, that wrestlers are now officially classified as actors rather than sports people. And that's super important in terms of insurance. So for the £10 a month that a wrestler could pay to become a member of this trade union, they are now eligible for that personal injury insurance. So if they are injured, at work on the way to work or during a match at work, they get a small payout every week that they are injured, which will help. It's not a massive amount, it's just over £100 a week, but it's enough to maybe cover someone's rent and just to give you a little bit of a safety net. So we see constantly wrestlers being injured and having GoFundMe set up for them. And that's cool and that's wicked. And if you want to support your favourite performer in that way, you can. But this is a way to maybe move to a more professional status. where wrestlers are sort of self-supporting, if that makes sense. And by working with equity, it allows us to sort of form a stronger group of wrestlers, I suppose, who are sort of united together.
Yeah, and I think the subject, I guess, of unions, it goes back a long way in the world of wrestling, and we can go back to the classic sort of Jesse Ventura trying to do it in WWF back in the 80s, or I think it was the 80s, and it's a big thing. It sounds so important what just happened, yeah. And it's more the UK scene than anywhere, just anywhere to see this happen.
Absolutely. I mean, this is just it's just a fundamental right of the performers to be protected and to have assistance and to not be mishandled or misrepresented by sort of like the people that are paying them to perform. We did a podcast with Shazza McKenzie, the Australian wrestler, recently, where she was discussing some of her experiences with regards to Me Too and with regards to being mistreated sort of backstage. And there's another service that Equity can provide. Equity provide a phone line that you can call at any time to get support. If anything like that has happened to you, if you are a victim of harassment, they have a support line that will tell you how to deal with it and where to go forward and provide you with support to deal with it as well. So rather than, it just gives performers a platform to not feel the need to be silent, not feel the need to start a Twitter war about it or start, talking about these things on social media or making people aware of it, but not naming anyone for fear of naming anyone, or even just for like legal advice. It's actually a support. It's a helpline for you to go to, so you can get right and proper support on how to deal with these issues moving forward. We don't want, we want everything to be more professional. So something, if I take the Me Too movement, it kind of came and went. It's still here. Like, people are still way more heightened and way more aware of it, but it kind of came and went. And we want the support and the procedure in support to be there all the time for these artists' welfare, sort of moving forward. It's ultimately as well, like we said at the start of the movement as well, we really wanted to concentrate on succeeding in goals of low-hanging fruit, we called it, which is essentially setting yourself a very, very simple goal to achieve really early on. Say, hey, we did that. And our goal for low-hanging fruit was to get every promoter in the country to guarantee that they would provide water for their talent backstage, which doesn't seem like a massive thing. But we achieved that. We got several promotions contacting us, asking us how they can help and how they can sign up to that. We've had promotions now regularly providing food and water and protein and everything for their artists backstage. And it's just that sort of minimum requirement of what you should expect as a performer. And we don't want these horror stories of, like performers not being picked up at the airport or not being told where they're going to stay or being forced to share a room with someone that they weren't aware of, and all these little things that outside of wrestling you would think are completely incomprehensible. Yeah. The conception of the movement for me, and I can't speak on behalf of David, but for me, when I saw that John Oliver piece where he spoke about the conditions of WWE performers being independent contractors and not contracted talent and not being afforded the same benefits as their accountants and as their office staff, that for me, because that just lit a fire in me, because like as soon as you show that to anyone outside of the wrestling industry, they're appalled by it. You show that to anyone like us who are aware of the wrestling industry and the way it works. When we saw that John Oliver piece, we just sort of went, well, yeah, that's how it is. And it's not until I showed it to like my wife or to other people, and they just went, really? They don't get healthcare? They don't get, and you're like, no, but that's wrestling. It's like, well, why is that different? And by little things like changing that equity dynamic within the trade union equity, whereby wrestlers are now actors, not just wrestlers, it means that this business is no longer undermined, and it means that they're on the same level as everyone else. And if they're on the same level as everyone else, they should expect the same terms and conditions of everyone else across the sort of entertainment industry.
And I mean, just taking it back a step, everything you just said there. I mean, I remember because I've been listening to the podcast you guys have done, and again, you can get these if you go to the WeTheIndependent.com site. There's some great chats with you and David Starr, and I think everyone listening to this probably knows who David Starr is. If you don't, he's the product. He's the Jewish canon. He's creaming your coffee. He's very good at Twitter. He's a great guy. He's like, he's really got a rocket on him at the minute in terms of on the indie scene. Yeah, and he was talking about this, and I thought, I can believe it when like you guys were saying just having the basic thing of having water backstage for wrestlers. I was like, no matter how small your independent wrestling show is, surely you supply water. But apparently not.
Apparently not, yeah. And it's not about making promoters bankrupt or, tightening the belts of it. It's just about basic conditions. And the fact of the matter is, if you look after your talent are more inclined to perform for you and to do a better job for you, and are more inclined to come back. And it just creates a better atmosphere overall,
It's just crazy. That's a great win. So now that all wrestlers get water. When it comes to the equity thing, and you said there's a lot of momentum behind it, which just help you get the insurance. I guess when we're talking what kind of momentum are we talking about here? And then related to that, one of the ways you're hoping to fund this is from the merchandise you guys are making.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's if we'll answer the question on merchandise first. The merchandise that we sell through our shop at wetheindependent.com/shop, which is going to increase over the next few months. A percentage of every piece of merchandise we sell goes directly to funding an independent performers equity membership. So eventually, and it's a slow drip process at the moment while we get contracts signed and while we get everything set up in place, we will have a team of ambassadors who are going to be working within the professional wrestling scene, who will be signed up to equity through the money that has been made from the merchandise sales, and also from say, for example, the show that was put on up in Sheffield recently. The benefit, the money from that entirely goes towards funding equity memberships for these guys going forward. So it's kind of unlike any other sort of merchandise store in professional wrestling at the moment, I suppose. There are certain ones that sponsor their athletes. There are certain ones who will do special release T-shirts that will give a proportion of their funds to charity. I've sold prints through Portrait of a Wrestler where I've given the whole amount of money to like Cavendish Cancer Care and to various charities, just because it's just a nice thing to do. You can guarantee that every piece of merchandise that you purchase through We The Independent is going directly to funding equity memberships for these guys. So I've spoken to some of these guys, although it's only £10 a month, £10 a month is still £10 a month. We're still supposedly, in austerity. We're still, not to get too political, but like the last Tory government came in and said that the first recent Tory government came in after the last Labour government and said, hey, we need to tighten our belts because Labour overspent and we've had a massive recession. So now we need to implement austerity. Austerity's been going on for about 10 years and now we've got a hard Brexit on the horizon, which is going to make it even worse. So I don't know when it's going to get better. Probably when we haven't got the Tories in power, I guess. I don't know. So ultimately, that's where that comes from, and that's where the support comes from, and the support network. And we believe that when we have the ambassadors on brand, they'll have their own sort of like specifically designed independent T-shirt, for which they will personally also receive a cut of the profit. So that won't just go towards their equity membership; that will just go directly to their pocket, and hopefully will give them a wider. Because the guys we're looking to sponsor are young up and coming guys. I'm not looking to sponsor guys, ultimately, that we want to sponsor as many people as possible. But the guys that we really, really want to focus on are the new guys coming through, the new generation coming through. And we talk about the momentum of the movement going forward. The public perception and the public face of this movement is super important. Now, I appreciate there's going to be wrestling fans who just want to go to a wrestling show to be entertained. That's absolutely fine. If you just want to go to a wrestling show to forget about your politics and just to be entertained by the action in the ring and the stories that are being told and the wins and the losses, that's absolutely fine. But we're still going to be making our message publicly aware, because it's only by making messages public aware and changing public perception and changing public trends do men in suits behind closed doors make difficult decisions. Men in suits behind closed doors of capitalist companies do not make decisions just out of the goodness of their heart. That means that they make less money. They make decisions that means they make less money purely because of public trends and the way that the public perceive their product. And by empowering the people, as we saw at David Starr's sort of Super Strong Style win, where essentially, everyone in that building wanted to see David Starr win the Progress Super Strong Style 16 tournament and take this movement further. And we're engaged by the movement, and we're engaged by his promo at the end of the match in the final against Jordan Devlin. That really sang to us in that, yeah, we've got people behind this. We've got a very forward-thinking, very progressive fan base in this country with regards to wrestling, who are in tune with their politics, who are in tune with their issues, and do want to see the welfare of wrestlers looked after going forward.
That's fair. I mean, no matter what you do, you'll get some dickheads in a wrestling crowd. But every time I've been to an event around London, it's really nice and quite, I guess, it seems obvious to say, but progressive compared to a lot of, I guess, compared to when I've been to the wrestling in America and going to a WWE show. It can be very different when you go to some of the indie scenes we've got. It's amazing.
One of the best reactions I've ever seen to an entrance in a British pro wrestling ring in the last few years was when Zack Sabre Jr. entered a Progress ring on day 2 of Super Strong Style wearing a Jeremy Corbyn t-shirt. It was just before that election, where he sort of like he lost Theresa May's seats. I mean, we were engaged with that. I came from an age there was a weird age in the 2000s when people weren't engaged in politics. People say, people aren't engaged in politics. Well, they're not engaged in politics because you've got a centrist Labour government. You haven't got right and left. You've got a centrist Labour government under Tony Blair fighting a sort of centre-right Tory government-ish sort of thing. But it was a very, very weak government at the time. There's nothing to get excited about. There's nothing to get engaged about. We've almost gone too far just now, though, because ultimately, last election, who are we going to vote for? Theresa May in one corner, Corbyn in the other. A Marxist against a hard righter. She's not necessarily a hard righter, but she represents a hard right party. That's a difficult decision to make for anyone sort of like somewhere in the middle, isn't it? But that's the thing about social media, and that's the thing about everything these days. It's either you either love or you hate. That's almost what we've trained ourselves with social media. You either like or you hate. What is it? Like, how many different reactions has Facebook got to its posts? Is it like you're allowed 5 different reactions?
Yeah,
of which 4 of them are positive.
Yeah.
Like love, so that's like really like, sad, and all that. It's kind of, but what it does allow for is it allows for discussion and it allows for clear distinctions. So this generation coming through understands what a left-wing politician is and what a left-wing politician stands for. They understand what a right-wing politician stands for, and they also understand the nuances in between. It's a fascinating time.
We've gone off into the world of politics. And
sorry, my apologies. My apologies.
It ties into this. This is why, the idea of, you have a union that actually supports you. Can't you look after yourself? It's like, no, that's not what it's about, type thing, isn't it? And
you can look after yourself, but isn't it nice? Like, it's good to have that backup. Like, I refer you back to the first thing I said about me being a member of the photography associations, and I've only needed that legal assistance twice.
Yeah.
But the fact it was there meant I could use it,
And even if you simplify it, if you're not in a union, just think about little things like if you've got insurance, or simple thing, you've got pet insurance. I mean, little thing like that, you pay that every month. Hopefully, you'll never need it. But when you do, and you get thousands of pounds of support to help you take care of an animal or a person you love, you actually appreciate it a bit more at that point. It was nice to have it and knew that it was in your back pocket.
It really was, and it is about just sort of like this small group of wrestlers in this country. When you actually, before we started up with the Independent, I had to sort of work out how many wrestlers there are in this country, and then how many wrestlers there are in the US, and sort of what our target market was, I suppose, in terms of reaching out. And it's not, when you compare it to actors or singers or dancers, it's like a drop in the ocean. So there's no reason why you can't try and get everyone together, because I think that's the sort of thing we've come up against. Is that I've been told, I've never been told, in my life, I'm really lucky, I've very rarely been told that I can't do something. This movement, I've been told 3 or 4 times in the last couple of months, just been told you can't do it. Like you said, Jesse Ventura can do it. Well, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but just because you can't do something doesn't mean you can't try. And if you're trying for the right reasons, which we entirely are, we should try. And we owe it to ourselves and to the next generation and to the people currently working here to try. We have to try, because if you don't try, you can't complain,
So I want to ask you about the pushback from wrestlers or promotions on this, like you just talked about. But also, did you actually find out how many wrestlers are there? I want to know. Did you get
I couldn't even get close. Honestly, I couldn't even get close to sort of working it out. All you could do is just look at the Pro Wrestling Illustrated 500.
Yeah.
And when you're in wrestling, you kind of know who those 500 are. So I suppose you could maybe quadruple that, maybe. But then you've got trainees on top of that as well. You've got Japanese talent, you've got Mexican talent, you've got German talent. Then there's talent popping up in Italy and Spain at the moment. Progress are about to do a show in Paris, so apparently there's French talent there as well.
Yeah, that's interesting what they've done now. But God, there's a lot going on then. Yeah,
there's a lot of wrestling.
So But so what's it been like so far? I think you guys have made great progress, but any particular, I know you've been reaching out to all the promotions in the UK trying to get them all to help get wrestlers on equity. Is there any sort of interesting pushback or feedback so far while you've been working on this for the past few months?
A lot of interest, a lot of interest in what we're doing. Everything's been, from what I can see, everything's been positive in terms of the independent side of things and the independent artists that we're reaching out towards. Ultimately with the projects and what we're trying to do with it, I can't see any reason to be negative or to push back against it. You know, I genuinely can't. Even if you were signed to, say, an NXT UK contract, there's still benefits to being a member of a trade union. There's still benefits to having your contract looked over, or any improvements to your contract looked over by a legal team and by a support team.
And we should say this isn't just about like, okay, you're injured, you're covered. This is guaranteeing the things that you were promised you get, in terms of you get picked up, you are getting paid this amount of money, you're getting a meal, if they are putting you in a hotel, you get all that in writing, and equity makes sure you can query that and follow up if you don't get it.
Well, yeah, it does. Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's just a support sort of network. And I can't talk about this publicly, obviously, but I've seen contracts for most, if not all, major promotions in the US, and certainly ones this side of the Atlantic as well, over the last 3 to 4 years. Because, I don't know, for whatever reason, wrestlers confide in me to look over these things.
You feel like a professional.
Whereas if they're a member of equity, they could just, use a professional. But I've seen them, and I've seen terrible ones. Okay, I've seen quite good ones. But the most important thing is I've seen guys go backwards and forwards 3 or 4 times with them, and I've said, "Oh, maybe get them to take that out and ask for something else here." And I've seen that happen, and I've seen the final contract that they've got, and it's come night and day from the first contract. So the biggest thing that we can inform the next generation coming through is to negotiate and to really look at the detail in your contracts, and not just be blown away by the 3 or 4 letters at the top of the contract that make you realize that you're not signing just to live your dream, because you're signing for your future, you're signing for your protection, and you're signing to maximize the amount of money that you can potentially earn. And that's what you're signing. So you should take, you should take that contract seriously, and you should negotiate. There's a wonderful scene in the US office. I don't know if you've seen the US office with
I've seen a few episodes. I'm not one of those guys that's obsessed and watched every one, but I must seen a few.
Well, the main guy in the office is Steve Carell's character, the main manager. He goes into a contract negotiation, and he says, and the guy who's about to offer him his new sort of wage or salary says, "We're about to offer you," and Michael cuts him off and he says, "Don't tell me your first offer, tell me your second offer." And I goes, "What?" He says, and then he looks at his mate and he says, "Never accept the first offer. You always accept the second offer. So why don't we just skip to the second offer straight away?" Do you know what I mean? Because I know your first offer is going to be ridiculous. And then he shows him the second offer and he says, "That's embarrassing. I don't even want to know what your first offer was." So they're immediately onto the third offer. But contracts are always a negotiation process, and there shouldn't be a fear about negotiation. There shouldn't be a fear about, if I negotiate, they're going to think I'm hard to work with. No, that's not the case at all. They're just going to think you're professional, and they're going to have a higher value on you, and you're going to have a higher worth to them. Because if they're willing to negotiate with you, and if they're willing to give into, your demands, I suppose, in terms of a contract, then you're going to be in a stronger position. There's going to be a stronger relationship going forward. It's about valuing yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I've been through a similar thing with like my partner, and she's like, when she was looking at just little things like changing jobs, and when you get a job offer, and it's like, am I accepting that, or how much can I push back and not feel? Because I think it's a British thing. We feel very weird about talking about money.
Oh, man.
Don't we? So.
Well, it's the M word. I saw a billboard for that over the last couple of months. It's the M word. It's like the difficult thing that people can't talk about. We open up about cancer. We open up about, mental health issues now. We open up about everything. But I still can't talk about money. I dread, but I'm the worst. I'm preaching, and I'm the absolute worst,
But you do a lot in terms of your work as well, like your rates and making sure people are committing to paying you. So
every wedding I shoot is a negotiation. every wedding I shoot is not about how good I am at taking pictures. That's the last thing, because they can see that. Every wedding is about how much discount they can get or what they can get for their money. It's it's not frustrating. It's just you've got to open yourself up to it. Being a freelancer myself, I know all about, that, and having things written down early on so you know exactly what you're offering people as well. So.
God. I want to sort of wrap up a couple of things talking about We the Independent, and then talk about your photography stuff as well. Like we just hinted at it there as well, in terms of, even photography for wrestling, it's not your day job. And then you're also doing this thing, for this equity stuff for We the Independent. Just a question. I saw Eve committing that they're going to get every one of their wrestlers, having equity. Is that tied into what you guys are doing, or is that them just going out and saying this is the right thing to do and the right time to do it?
Eve can stand on their own 2 feet. That's Eve. That's all Eve. We it's just kind of like a perfect storm of everything happening together. I think Emily and Dan are, that it's very easy to sort of like pinpoint where their political allegiances lie. I don't think you have to scratch too deep into the surface of Eve. But I think the progress and the statement they have made with that is huge. It's genuinely huge. I think did Stephen say this on his podcast about ITV Sport?
It was. It was. When you went, and we're talking about the World of Sport show that was on when that was that last year? Oh, it's a while ago. Was it last year or the year before?
It feels. I don't know when the pilot was. The pilot was Christmas. Was it New Year's Eve one year?
Yeah, and then they did the one season. They've yet to confirm if they're coming back. But I remember you talked about this on the podcast and the fact that it's going to be on ITV. So in theory, their talent that are on a TV show, they need some sort of contract. And I remember, you talked about it then.
This is what Stephen said off camera, off podcast. He said everyone you can think of in World of Sport, who's anyone in World of Sport, had an equity contract back in the day. Because there was only 4 channels of TV, 3 in the early 80s, and because they had a mainstream presence. They were doing pantomime, they were doing Saturday morning kids shows, they were doing game shows in the evening. They were everywhere, so they were entertainers. So they needed the equity contracts. So it's not like it's a new thing, and it should be, like I said, it should be something that everyone should be taking on board. Yeah,
I mean, just to summarize, like why this is, if people want to know more, so I found that the podcast you guys are doing are really good, and I think the first 2 in particular goes into a lot about what you're trying to achieve. And if you don't want to if people think, I just don't want to hear about unions, I think episode 2 has a really good wrestling quiz at the end, so you can take part in that as well. Otherwise, so
David hates my quizzes. He doesn't like them. He rolls his eyes.
It's a really good one. You can, if you're listening to it, second half of the show, just play along, because you can see how well you do against the guys on the show.
See, I did it so you could play along. I did it deliberately so everyone could play along. People David doesn't understand this, how technical that is. He just gets upset when he loses. So yeah, but whatever.
But people should definitely stay on top of this. It's you guys are going to be in the news a bit more going forward in the coming months as well. There's a website, the podcast. There's cool merchandise going on.
Month 1, this is what I keep saying. Month one, we didn't plan any of this. But month 1, an insurance company got hold of their underwriters and changed their insurance policy. Now, I used to work in insurance. I know how bloody difficult that is. In month 1, we made that happen. In month 1, we got a bunch of promotions to promise that they would provide proper food and water backstage for their wrestlers. That happened in month 1. In month 1, we opened up a merchandise store that secured enough funding for 6 professional wrestlers to be signed up to equity for the first year. And in month 1, 6 promotions got together and put on a show on our behalf, proceeds of which came to fund equity memberships up in Sheffield. And I believe that there's more on the way in regards to that. That was month 1. That's what we achieved. And it's utterly ridiculous, in terms of momentum and in terms of making a change and making a difference. And there's a ton of stuff that we've been doing behind the scenes in private conversations that we've had with men in suits that we can't talk about right now.
It sounds like it's going really good, though.
But when we can talk about it, you're going to hear about it. I can guarantee that. Okay.
And I think, and if you want to just I think David Starr, I guess at the moment, is kind of the public face of this, and just talking about him, he's got a great couple of events coming up, which hopefully even will raise the profile more, because I'm sure he'll be wearing his independent T-shirt when he headlines Rev Pro next week. So I think that's sold out now at York Hall against Ospreay for Summer Sizzler.
Yeah.
And then after that, he's got Volta at Ali Pali.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's going to be a massive show, so I'm sure that's going to help with the momentum.
2 big shop windows. Ospreay's I'm going to say it, Ospreay's the greatest wrestler in the world right now.
I'm conflicted about this match. I love both guys.
But what you do, the other thing about David as well, not only the promos that we're cutting with him at the moment and the message we're cutting with him and everything we're doing, top of his game, his matches are the top of the game as well at the moment. He is wrestling like he's never wrestled before. He's wrestling all the styles. He's wrestling all around the world. His schedule at the moment is ridiculous. He's he's one of the hardest working men in pro wrestling right now. And he's, just so active and he's so transparent with who he is. Yeah. Like they always say, like the best wrestlers are the ones that are just themselves turned up to 11, and that guy's turned up to 200. Yeah. And what you see is what you get.
I don't know if I'm just projecting it onto him, but it feels like we the independent movement at the same time is really pushing him on, really giving him that extra something.
Yeah, it just, like I said, it's that dose of reality as well. Like I think it's Cody Rhodes who said, "We're in the reality era now, and reality is reality." So it's like the hokey stuff. We like the hokey stuff. We like the jokey stuff. We like being able to lose ourselves into it. But the real magic, the real grey area in wrestling, which is unique only to wrestling, are the bits where you're like, oh shit, is that real? Was that a real thing that really happened? And I think that's where wrestling's so unique from everything else. We still talk about the Montreal Screwjob. Still. What more is there to say?
So I'm going to do a last. WeTheIndependent.com. Check it out. And make sure everyone goes to that. We'll take a short break and we will then talk about your other business, which is photography.
Hey, you. If you like the podcast, then remember to like the Holy Shoot Wrestling Podcast on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Holy Shoot Pod. Do it! Do it now!
So this half of the show, I want to talk about Portrait of a Wrestler, because that's how I actually came to know you. I don't even know how it happened. It would have been one of my favourite wrestlers posting some amazing picture on Instagram. And then it became a theme of, here's all these amazing pictures, and it's this one guy doing it. And I mean, there were some legendary ones. I mean, people will recognise maybe Marty Scurll in the sea in his suit. The English guys doing Clockwork Orange. A series you've done with Jimmy Havoc where he looks like a psychopath. There's some really good ones in there. And yeah, like I say, I think we alluded to it earlier, like taking photos of wrestlers isn't your day job. The day job is the wedding photography and those kind of events. But how did you get into professional wrestling photography and how has that been going?
I just needed to do a project that allowed me to apply for a photographic qualification. And I was going for the highest qualification you can get in the UK, so I needed to do something different. And I was a wrestling fan, and I spent 8 months trying to contact wrestlers to shoot just for free. Just said, we just want to shoot you for free just to do this creative project. And in 8 months, I got 0 responses. I just couldn't, because I didn't have anything to show them. All I had was babies and weddings. So trying to convince them as to what I could do was a bit difficult. And I eventually just turned up at a show in Portsmouth, where I met the Fearless Flatliner and Andy Boy Simmons, and showed them some of my work, and then showed them some other work from Rob Schamberger, who's like a watercolor painter for WWE. He does these beautiful watercolors for them, and I showed them his work. I said, I want to do this, but with photography, and they both said yeah. And then I shot them too, and then it goes like this: I shot Flatliner, who introduced me to Andy at the show. Andy then had his shoot, introduced me to Marty Scurll. Marty Scurll introduced me to Doug Williams. Doug Williams introduced me to Darrell Allen, who's the trainer up in Knuckle Locks. He introduced me to all the people in Knuckle Locks, who introduced me to Jimmy Havoc. Jimmy Havoc introduced me to Progress, and off to the races we went. That was it. It's basically just a case of just make sure when you're shooting them We know we're getting free pictures, essentially. I think that's why they were recommending me.
Yeah.
But when you're shooting them, making sure you're as professional as possible, and just, and making sure that they recommend you to someone else. That's basically how the business began.
Cool. And as I said, there's been some amazing photos you're doing there. And how are you fitting that around your actual day job? Because are you getting to travel much and do this? Because I don't know if you get abroad to take some of these ringside shots.
Yeah, I used to travel quite a lot. I used to travel regularly to sort of progress shows and shows up in Nottingham for WrestleGate and anywhere and everywhere really. And I'm a father. I'm a husband and a father, so it's kind of become a bit difficult just recently to sort of justify the time away. So essentially, I was just sort of treating it as like my little day away. Camden for progress wasn't too much of a problem, so it was always on a Sunday. It just means I had to give up my Sunday, that was all. But I just go up on the train. It's only 2 hours on the train, and then I'm back. And when Marty was wrestling for progress, we used to travel together as well. So it's quite good fun, really. But ultimately, because we knew that I was doing it for the qualification and for the project, we knew that it was going to be worthwhile in the end. I eventually passed the qualification and got the certificate and everything, but I mean that just led on to more work because your name gets a bit more notice. I do a lot more speaking engagements now. So I spoke in Las Vegas at the International Convention of Photographers this year, WPPI.
Right. Cool.
I've just been selected to speak there again next year. That would never have happened if I hadn't have shot this wrestler project.
So is that based on like showing your portfolio of work, what you've been doing wrestling related, and your skills?
Yeah, it's basically that, and then putting together seminars that you can give to other photographers that teach them about lighting and about posing and composition, storytelling, and all this kind of stuff. I did a 2-hour presentation on Portrait of a Wrestler that I've taken sort of around the country to various photography associations, and it tells the story of how it came about and all the people that I've met. And everything from doing cool ringside shots to shots of Jimmy Havoc covered in blood and shocking otherwise unshockable photographers with some of the work that we've put in together there. And also with those talks, I get to talk about Chris Travis, which is really important. Whenever I do them, we tend to sort of like take all of the entry fees that photographers have paid and we donate everything to the Cavendish Cancer Care, just because. I was lucky enough to photograph Chris's last studio portrait before his last match with Marty, and it's quite a special thing. And moments like that and images like that are the reason why photography is so important. It's because you're creating something that's utterly timeless, something that will last. And that series of portraits is really, really special. Because it means something outside of wrestling. It's something much more important than that. Does that make sense? Sorry to bring it down.
No, that makes sense. I was say on that same kind of topic, but just like when it comes to working with those kind of talents, like you say, like how much of your like the ideas you've had is like your ideas, their ideas? Who's been the most engaged in that? Because that's why your work stands out so much to me, is because it's a different angle. It's not just wrestler stand here, look angry. It's being creative of what you're using around them.
Yeah, the ones that are most engaged with me are the ones that you'll see most on my profile. I've worked so well with Jimmy. We did a calendar of horror homages to horror movies with Jimmy, and then we just, for the current calendar last year, we just took him around London and took him to various film locations. It's like the church in The Omen. And the shop that Sean buys a cornetto from in Shaun of the Dead. And we just basically spent a day in London just catching Ubers and just travelling around to do these shots. And that's really cool, keeps me on my toes. I've always worked well with Marty. Marty was the first person to come to me for video promo ideas, and you can still find them on YouTube. We did a trilogy of video promos with him and just tried to tell his story through his character. And anyone who's going to jump in the sea with an umbrella is good in my book.
Yeah, that's one of the best photos as well. I mean, it's ruined his suit, but it's an amazing photo.
It was a cheap suit. No, it wasn't. It was obviously not. No, it's Ric Flair. It's $500.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, yeah. But we both always have similar. We understand each other in terms of our ideas. Flash Morgan Webster is another one who came down to visit us, and we took him around some vinyl shops. Around Portsmouth,
Flash Morgan,
with Flash, and then we took him down by the beach and made it look like Brighton, and just anyone who's willing to take that extra step with their character. Because I see, like, I'll do trainee shoots a lot, and I've told this story before, but like you'll shoot your first 3 trainees, and you'll go, okay, so what's the character? Oh, I'm a heel. Okay, what sort of heel? Oh, I'm a cocky heel. Well, why are you cocky? Oh, because I think I'm better than everyone. Okay, and then rest of number 2 comes up. Oh, I'm a heel. Okay, what sort of heel? Oh, I'm a cocky heel. Okay. And then, like,
it was stunning Steve Austin. It's like, what makes you so stunning?
Right, you know, and I think it's a question that, like, I think Glenn Joseph of Progress once said to me, he said, when I'm working with someone on their character, one of the first questions I'll ask them is, what was your character doing when they were 5 years old? Because immediately it gives that performer, you have to invent a backstory to get from 5 to the present day. So why have they become the way they are? Tell a story from 5 through their adolescent years all the way through. One of the first people that really from a trainee shoot stood out to me was Spike Trevay. Coincidentally comes from an acting background. But I asked him what character he was, and he just spoke at me for a minute about what school he went to, all the little gimmicks, all the props that he bought, how they work with him, why he brought them along. He brought along his top pocket. He had a silver spoon. He said, "Yeah, because that's the one I was born with. I keep it on me." You know,
that's cool. I love that.
Right, and that's character. That's going to get you noticed. That's going to get you booked in places, because there's all those. It's the 3 things, isn't it? It's look, technical ability, and character. And you need 2 of the 3 to be a star. All 3 of them, and you're a megastar sort of thing. And only a few people have actually got all 3 of them. But so you have to accentuate the positives, you know, in terms of like what you can and can't bring to the table. But I love working with guys like that. I love working with guys that have got ideas and character. And the fact we go back to Marty as well. Marty was one of the early adopters of the Steven Spielberg philosophy of you should be able to identify a character from its silhouette if it's strong enough. And he was talking at the time about E.T., Darth Vader, and Jaws. You draw a silhouette of those characters, you know exactly who Yoda. You know exactly who you're talking about, okay? So he went with the villain with the Plague Doctor mask and the fur coat and the top hat and the umbrella. That's the villain. But the point is, he started off with a suit, then he added the fur coat, then he added the hat, then he added the sunglasses, then he added the umbrella, and then he added the Plague Doctor mask. So it wasn't like it all came at once. It was like, oh, I'm just going to do this now. Oh, I'm just going to add this on there now. Oh, the amount of secondhand thrift stores we had to go around in Portsmouth looking into these fur coats. Because they were completely unwashable. But yeah, no, so I mean, yeah, so it's about taking that and always moving and changing something about you, so you're not staying the same and stagnating, you know. And that's what the absolute best performers do. John Cena did it. People don't realise it, but he did do it, because every week or every month, every pay-per-view, he'd have a different colour T-shirt.
He had to make his money on the merch there, didn't he, as well?
Nah, Cena's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But still changed it up. He still changed it, you know. So, but whatever. Anyway.
That's great. I mean,
Cena's great, by the way. I don't mean that as a knock on Cena. I saw Cena give an entire press conference in Mandarin. Learned Mandarin just to do the press conference. He was the phenomenal company man. Unbelievably good from a business perspective. Unbelievably good figurehead for that company.
Great guy. I mean, people can buy your photography, right? I mean, they should. What's the Instagram account? It's all
Y2. It's all Y2 Jim Bob. Letter Y, number 2 Jim Bob. So you can find me Y2 Jim Bob on Instagram and Twitter.
And obviously, portraitofawrestler.com. You can find all the info there.
Yeah.
See your portfolio of work. Buy your prints. You've got like Jimmy Havoc book, I believe.
We've dug out 10 that we didn't realise we had, and they're all signed. So you can get yourself a signed Jimmy Havoc book, which is basically all of his years in progress that I was shooting there. So it covers 3 years of his work in progress. Lots of backstage stuff, lots of stuff in that book that hasn't been seen before, lots of stuff I haven't released. There's backstage stuff basically that I take and don't release, just because I know that it will have a historical significance. And that's another thing. Sorry to cut you off. That's another thing about photography. One of WWE's highest rated clicks on their website is when they release like old photos that have never been before seen in the 80s and 90s and all that kind of stuff, and all this thing that sort of happened. Everything's so video based now, but you still can't recreate the impact of a single image.
Yeah,
you know?
I know I check that stuff out when you see all the classic stuff coming out.
You do, you know, because it's all the good stuff, you know. It's all the good stuff.
I mean, I'd love to stay and chat about all your photography for a lot longer, but I know you've got to get on. You've got someone here. I mean, someone's waiting for you to take photos of them.
I've got Julio from Bullet Club coming to bring his 8-foot frame into this studio and see if we can shoot him. But yeah, we're doing some Julio images now, which would be cool. Should be fun.
Are you going to be? Are you out and about? How much events are in the next few weeks? Are you going to be like there for taking photos?
If this comes out in time, then I'll be at the Brighton Riptide Wrestling double bill this Monday, Bank Holiday Monday.
Oh, cool.
Which would be cool. Might be at a big wrestling event on the 31st of August that isn't in the UK, but I can't confirm or deny that at the moment.
That's a busy weekend.
That's the busy weekend. It's the pick a side weekend. I don't think it is the pick a side weekend at all. I think it's the celebration with.
It's just a weekend where how do you find time to watch all of it? Don't pick one of it.
You got these Welsh guys who are so ingrained in NXT UK, who are having a super show in their capital city, in their country. I think that's just phenomenal. Honestly, it's just, and I know how buzzed they are for it. I know how buzzed they must be for it. You got Zach and Will in London killing it with the best talents in the world, and you've got Jimmy and Kip leading the charge for our boys over in Chicago.
It's an amazing weekend. Yeah,
it's exciting time to be a wrestling fan.
And I'll be there for David Starr taking Ospreay at York Hall. So
good for you.
I'll
Give him a cheer.
So
can you imagine Rev Pro being run by Starr?
That's why I'm intrigued by where it's going.
Be good, wouldn't it? If he was doing all the ring announcing, all the match planning.
It's such an old school booking logic. I love it.
That's brilliant. No, the best ideas are the simplest ones. Don't convolute stuff. Yeah. Make it easy. Paul Heyman says that you just need someone that you really want to see win against someone you really want to see lose.
Simple as that sometimes.
That easy.
Great. Thanks for your time today, my friend. I'm sure. Maybe chat to you another time.
All the best, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This podcast is affiliated with the WWL Meetup Group. WWL, or Watch Wrestling London, get together with many fans to watch pay-per-view replays on Monday nights and attend live events across London, be it WWE, Progress, Rev Pro, Eve, and many more. It's a great way to watch wrestling with friendly people, and all are welcome to join. You can find out more at watchwrestling.london, or just Google Watch Wrestling London and you'll find the meetup page. Well, Fireflies, I hope you enjoyed listening to that as much as I enjoyed recording it. I thought I'd help everyone out here as well. We referred to a few wrestling events during that chat, and I thought it would be worth listing those for all of you, as there are some real bangers coming up that you can either attend live, or you'll be able to catch up on demand later. James said he will be at Riptide Wrestling. That is an event in Brighton. Riptide popular company runs all their shows in Brighton. This one is a bank holiday wrestling show at the Brighton Open Air Theatre, where they are actually running 2 family-friendly shows both in the afternoon and the evening, which also includes special VIP Dave Benson Phillips. Yes, that Dave Benson Phillips. It's a great opportunity. It should be a sunny day, right? It's a lovely weekend, so I suggest if you're in the Brighton area, you get down there and watch it if you can, or you can catch it up later on demand, because Riptide, it's worth checking them out. They have really high production values on their shows. Then, in my role as event organiser for Watch Wrestling London, Europe's largest meetup group for fans of professional wrestling, I am attending RevPro's Summer Sizzler with a good crowd of our members on Friday the 30th at York Hall in London. This show has some of the biggest names from New Japan appearing on it, including Freaking Carter, and is highlighted by Will Ospreay versus David Starr in a company versus Rev Pro career match. Although, to give that full credit, we should probably announce this as the aerial assassin Will Ospreay versus the cream in your coffee, your favourite wrestler's favourite wrestler, the Jewish Canon, the physical embodiment of charisma, the Bernie Sanders of professional wrestling, the most entertaining man in professional wrestling, Mr. American Rana, Davey Wrestling, the 104-minute man, the main event. He's really good at Twitter, the king of taunts, the product, David Starr. There are currently a handful of tickets left. I know it's less than 70. They might have all gone by now. So if you want to get in on that show, you need to act quickly, or you can catch it up on demand later if you can't make it. We also talked about an upcoming Progress show, and Mr. Starr is continuing his amazing run following his win at Progress Super Strong Style, where he won that tournament to earn the right to face the Progress champion Walter at Alexandra Palace on Sunday, September 15th. This show is going to be the best way that you can spend a Sunday afternoon. Not only do we have that match, we also have top talent from NXT, Keith Lee and Matt Riddle, there to face British Strong Style. There's even a Royal Rumble match, and it's a packed card. There are tickets still available for that one. So that just leaves me to say thanks once again to James for being on the show. Thanks to Nina Samuels for our intro that you will have heard very much at the top. And then our friends at the B+ Players for the music this week. I played an instrumental version of their Ruby Riot approved song about, well, Ruby Riot during the intro. I'm going to leave you with the full version of this song from their album Yes, available on iTunes, Spotify and everywhere you would expect to find good music. But until next time, this is the Holy Shoot Podcast signing off.
Oh no, things are getting quiet. Time to start a Ruby Riot. Tear it down, stir up in confusion. We're moving to the front of our own revolution. Kick bust, open your face. You're gonna need some Sally Sisters, so we'll up with love lace. Got a girl you know she's going up against the odds. You're gonna take other opponents with the riot squad. Oh no, things are getting quiet. Time to start a Ruby Riot. Gonna beat you, gonna punch her every orc. Gonna dye your tongue blue. Guess who? Liv Morgan. She's fighting alligators down in the mud, cause Sarah Logan's veins are flowing with Viking blood. And she's a muscle of the crew, you know she's looking real scary. Her name is Dobson, but they call her Crazy Mary. Oh no.